Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the Avengers, episode 22, Kill the King. Whoa, she remembered a title. It's time for Kill the King. I hope you're all doing really well. I hope life is good. I am absolutely freezing. I'm like layered upon layered up, which is... Guys, I know some people hate Christmas and I know some people think it starts early, but the minute it hit the 1st of November and everything was Christmassy, my mentality changes. I swear it helps my mental health. So I'm in a great mood today. I'm also planning on doing a couple of these today just to whiz through a bit, as you will have seen on Patreon that I am doing 31 uploads in December, an upload every single day, which I'm actually very, very excited about. So I would like to get a couple done because obviously I don't think I will be starting series 2 in December, but it means that I can crack on with it the minute I come back in January. So I just want to get through these with the greatest of respect, and then we can really get into things. So let's go with this, Kill the King, and we'll have a discussion at the end. I wonder which king we're killing. Kill the king.
A private jet from the Far East is 20 minutes from London. On board, deep in discussion, are King Tennyson of Shampur and the Prince Serekit. Serekit says the king must not sign the treaty in London. It will incite civil war, but Tennyson refuses to compromise with the Tukshan, who plan to usurp him from power. A steward enters. Serekit's granddaughter, Mai Li, notices he has a gun. He draws it, but Serekit leaps at the gunman, causing him to miss his target. Serekit is himself hit, but not seriously, and General Chuk, the king's head of security, restrains the steward. As the plane comes into land at London Airport, the king orders Chuk to kill the assassin, and the man is thrown from the aircraft.
Yeah.
Kill the King. Written by James Mitchell, produced by Leonard White, and directed by Roger Jenkins.
At the London suite reserved for King
This is the narrator I like.
Steed meets Crichton Bull, a Foreign Office man. The royal entourage is due shortly, and Steed has arranged for Carol Wilson to attend to Prince Serekit's injuries.
Oh, she looks
as her
lovely.
employer, Dr. David Keel, is on duty at the hospital and cannot be called away. Crichton Bull stresses to Steed the importance of King Tennyfon's visit. If the treaty goes unsigned, Britain will lose a significant Far Eastern oil concession. Steed is more concerned that the king should get out of the country alive. He has survived 5 assassination attempts in 3 years, and if the king is killed on his watch, Steed will find his employment terminated just as quickly.
Gosh.
Carol is briefed by Crichton Bull
Look how
about
clear
her
these
patient's
pictures are.
condition. The three proceed to the balcony to view the king's arrival. Meanwhile, a Major Harrington calls at the home of Mrs.
I always feel very
Carter.
grateful when I get a clear
He
picture.
brings news of her husband, Tony, who went missing in Shampur a year ago and is believed dead. Harrington reveals that Carter is alive, a hostage of the Tukshan rebels. If he can stay for a few days, posing as a friend of her husband's, Tony will be freed, but if she doesn't play along, her husband's death is a certainty. She asks the Major what he plans. You know, Mrs. Carter, I've shot a lot of big game out east, but this will be the first time I've had a pop at royalty. I'm going to kill a rich, brilliant man. A man I rather like, actually. And such an easy shot, too. Harrington comments as he looks from Mrs. Carter's
don't normally
window
get dialogue.
across the road. He lines up his sights on Steed, who stands there. On the balcony, Steed complains to Crichton Bull that the suite chosen is far from secure. The Shampur embassy insisted upon it, says Crichton Bull, so they will have to make the best of it. Steed is introduced to the king, who reveals he is under great pressure not to sign the treaty and fears for his life. Steed must protect him. The king will not be swayed from his intent by rebels. Carol enters with Prince Serekit, who has benefited from her treatment. The king is grateful to Carol for her dedication and skill. She is called away when Keel telephones from the hospital, where he is being kept busy in the maternity ward. She reports that the princess' wound was only slight, and that she was able to treat it with antiseptic, bandages, and a tetanus injection. Carol leaves for the surgery, and Steed remains with General Chuk to question him about the incident on the flight to London. Chuk believes that Serekit's brother, Prince Sadek, a Tukshan sympathizer, had ordered the assassination attempt. Steed confronts the general on a particular issue. "I can't help wondering what possessed you to dump that steward overboard without interrogating him first," says Steed. Meanwhile, Zoe Carter tells Harrington
I don't trust
she had
that-
left her husband and
that
regrets
guard.
the way she behaved. Crichton Bull visits them and inquires as to Harrington's identity. Mrs. Carter tells the Foreign Office official the story that Harrington had insisted upon. He is an old friend of her husband's. She can vouch for him. Crichton Bull is satisfied. Harrington's plan is falling into place. At his bookshop, Wu Meng and two other Shampoor nationals, Tapai and Su Shong, discuss plans to overthrow King Tenafon. Su Shong will approach the king when he appears on the balcony. "You will call out for him and hail him as the savior of our country. You will then execute him for what he is, a murdering criminal," orders Wu Meng. Crichton Bull tells Steed that he is not to worry about Harrington. He has worked with people like him for years, totally trustworthy, but Steed is not convinced. He telephones 110, who resolves to check Harrington's background with the Singapore office. Back at the bookshop, Su Shong has left. Wu Meng explains to Tapai that Su Shong will fail. The king is too well guarded, but once Su Shong has been arrested, he expects security to be scaled back, and then Wu Meng will carry out the execution of King Tenafon. In the king's suite, Steed learns that Tenafon has left for a London night spot. Prince Serekit reveals the king has a reputation with the ladies, and Tenafon proves this when he arrives with Ingrid Storm, a vivacious dancer, at his side. Leaving the others to discuss arrangements, Steed takes the opportunity to have a chat with Miss Storm and Mai Li. Ingrid shows Mai Li a charm that she claims the king gave her. Steed does not believe her and makes her tell the truth. She received it, along with £50, from a man called Wu Meng. In return, she was to ingratiate herself with the king and report back about security arrangements. Mai Li comments that in her language, Wu Meng translates as Mr. Nobody. Across the way, Major Harrington taunts Zoe. She asks if he can help her husband, but his response is evasive. The doorbell rings. It is Steed, following up on inquiries made earlier. Harrington confirms that he is a rubber planter based in Malaya and that he is visiting relatives in the north of England, stopping off first in London at Mrs. Carter's invitation. He hadn't met her before, but had messed together in India with her husband in 1943. Harrington claims never to have visited Shampoor. Steed talks to Mrs. Carter privately and asks if Harrington has said anything of Tony Carter's demise. Fearing for her husband's safety, she lies that the Major has not spoken about him. Their discussion is interrupted. In the street below, students have begun a demonstration against the king. Tenafon has also heard the disturbance and strides to the balcony. There is the sound of a shot. Ingrid runs off. The gunman is captured. It is Su Shong, the man sent by Wu Meng. Having heard the shot, Steed dashes to the king's suite to investigate. He arrives and complains that the king should not have exposed himself to risk so carelessly. "A better shot with a better gun and you'd be dead," warns Steed. Tenafon explains he must
I
listen
feel like
to the
we've had a
voice of
lot
his
more
people.
dialogue in this than normal.
Steed insists that the king only goes out on the balcony with his express consent. Shortly afterwards, Steed receives a call from 110. He has no information on Harrington, but has ascertained that Tony Carter, a British agent, is definitely dead, executed by Tukshan rebels. Meanwhile, Wu Meng meets with Ingrid in her dressing room at the nightclub. She explains the security layout of the king's suite and reveals that she believes Steed has had her watched. Wu Meng decides it is time to act against Steed. He orders Ingrid to telephone Steed and lure him to the club. In her apartment, Zoe Carter asks Major Harrington about her husband. He last saw him 4 weeks ago. He was very thin but reasonably well. She asked how Tony was coping with his malaria. Harrington reassures her that the condition is under control. "But Tony never suffered from malaria," exclaims Zoe. "You never knew him. You've done nothing but lie since you stepped in this house. Tony is dead. They killed him," she says accusingly. Harrington concedes that she is quite correct. However, if she values her own life, she has little choice but to do as he says.
That's awful.
Later, Ingrid Storm is surprised when Crichton Bull arrives in her dressing room. She had expected Steed, but Crichton Bull explains he was asked to deputise. Ingrid regains her composure and reveals that Meng can be found at 127 Maxwell Street in Cheapside. She also asks if the charm that Steed had confiscated, depicting the Champort crest sitting on the back of a jade elephant, will be returned to her. Crichton Bull is sure he has seen it somewhere else, but struggles to remember where. Meng attempts to enter the king's suite, posing as a champagne waiter. He waves a pass and is allowed through. Steed follows and comments that the waiter is not on the king's regular staff. Meng opens the champagne bottle and sprays the liquid in Steed's face. The pair fight. Steed gains the upper hand and eventually subdues Meng. The king commends Steed for dealing with the attack so efficiently. Crichton Bull returns, having sent some men to find Prince Sardek in Cheapside. Steed is grateful, but expects the search to be fruitless, as he recalls the address is that of a maternity clinic. A servant enters and hands the charm, the good monkey, to Steed. Crichton Bull recognises it as the one Ingrid mentioned, but is sure he has seen it elsewhere. Steed insists it is vital Crichton Bull recalls this detail. "Who have you seen today?" Steed asks the Foreign Office man. "Only Mrs. Carter," he says. "Good Lord, it was the Major. It was a label on his case." Steed dashes to Mrs. Carter's flat, but is told that Harrington has left town to see relatives in the north. Steed leaves and Zoe closes the door. The Major walks up to her. She almost convinced him too. Steed races back to warn the king that there will be another attempt on his life. He believes it will occur tomorrow when the king makes his scheduled appearance on the balcony. Steed insists it be cancelled. The king reluctantly agrees. Steed reveals that later that night he intends to break into the flat opposite, where he means to deal with a sniper. In that flat, Harrington reveals to Zoe that his wait is nearly over. He tells Mrs. Carter that if she is good, she can watch. Suddenly, there is a distinctive sound of an approaching helicopter. Major Harrington readies his rifle and brings his eye to the sight. "A helicopter," observes Harrington. "Fascinating things, helicopters. Quite a novelty. People still stop and look at them." "So that's how," says Zoe Carter, the realization dawning. "That's how," the Major responds coldly. The king has heard the approaching helicopter and wishes to see it. Crichton Bull protests and checks the balcony is safe. Harrington's gun sights focus upon the Foreign Office man. "Wrong fella," curses the Major. The king and Serikit make for the balcony. Crichton Bull tells Chook the king must be stopped. Chook declares that no one can touch the king's person, not even he himself. In desperation, Crichton Bull calls for Steed, who dashes to the balcony. Harrington takes aim. If only he can get a clear shot. His finger presses harder against the trigger. Steed bundles the king to the floor. A shot rings out, and Prince Serikit falls. Steed and the king scramble inside. Across the way, Harrington is preparing his getaway. Suddenly, the door is thrown open, and Chook barges in. He takes Harrington by surprise and shoots him dead.
Oh, God.
Meanwhile, in the king's suite, Prince Serikit lies dead. The king appears grief-stricken, but Steed has seen through him. He holds the king with a steely glare. "You and Chook had it all arranged. You hired Harrington when he was in Champort last year, and you had him kill Prince Serikit because he was a neutralist, a compromiser," Steed accuses. "He wanted you to let his brother Sardek in, but you knew that if that happened, the Tukshan would take the country from you. He was a good man, a saintly man. I loved him, but he had to die. In the end, I had no choice," says the king regretfully. Chook returns, and the king reveals to him that Steed has seen through their unpleasant scheme. But Steed's hands are tied.
I don't think the king
"There's
would
nothing
be
much
involved.
I can do," Steed concedes. "You have your diplomatic immunity." Later, Steed meets with Keel on the balcony outside the king's suite. Keel has finished
Is
the
that
day
Keel?
at the hospital and has missed all the excitement. Looking out over the London night, Keel reflects on what he would have been doing on an evening like this before his fiancée Peggy was murdered. Steed asks him why he devotes so much time to fighting crime. Keel looks off into the night. He does not need to answer. Steed knows.
Another wonderful episode. I kept saying it during it, but I felt like we had a lot more dialogue than normal, unless I've just, for some reason, acknowledged it more in that. But I just felt like we did. It was another one of those episodes that I really wish we'd seen. I think because I felt like there were a few more characters, it's harder to keep track, I find, when it's a recon, and it just helps when you've got the episode. And I really liked the look of that because we had Steed kind of leading the way, and I feel like I have more of a connection with Dr. Keel, so it would have been nice to have that episode with Steed. I liked the twist that the king was involved. I did expect that his right-hand man was involved. Yeah, a good episode. Again, just wish that we had them, because I don't really feel like when I get to the end of the episode there's too much I can say, because I can't comment on all the little details. I can just comment on the pictures we had. I'm always very grateful when we have some clear imagery, because the grainy pictures, I mean, some of them are just so hard to kind of see what's going on. So when I feel like we had a few clearer ones in that, maybe because it was a 15-minute recon, I don't know, but I really like that narrator as well. He's the one I like. So another good episode, and I'm going to crack on. Thank you for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you very soon for episode 23.